Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and welcoming back to the channel, Reed Little from the Contrarians. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you for inviting me to talk Sabbath again.
Absolutely. Today we are going to talk about, in my opinion, probably the most underrated album in the entire Sabbath catalogue, and this is the 1986 album Black Sabbath, featuring Tony Iommi, Seventh Star. So, Reed, this is kind of celebrating, it's very timely. It's celebrating a tick over its 40th anniversary. It was released on the 28th of January, 1986, featuring the vocals of the voice of rock, Mr. Glenn Hughes. Completely different band. And originally, this album was designed to be a Tony Iommi solo project, but the record company strong armed Tony to change it and put the Black Sabbath moniker, thinking it was immensely more marketable. So, my first question to you, Reed Little, is did you buy this album in the day? Did you live through the songs and the performances of this Seventh Star in the day?
So, yes, with the qualification, I didn't buy it. This was back in the day when I had one friend. Now, I was a senior in high school when this came out. Um, I had one friend who bought everything he could get his hands on that was heavy metal related. So as soon as it dropped, he bought a copy of it and he burned me a cassette tape copy of it. And funny story, so this album is way too short, right? It's only 35 minutes. It's a very short album. Well, my friend didn't want to waste a cassette that was 45 minutes on a side on it. So he copied it onto a 30-minute cassette, meaning that it cuts off halfway through Angry Heart. And now every time I'm listening to this album on CD, I know exactly where it ended on my old cassette. So, funny thing.
Yeah, so I bought the album in the day. I've got a first pressing on the Vertigo label, and there's Tony looking very full on, and lyric sheet, all the lyrics, and some very interesting sort of artwork, demon artwork. And we'll talk about this because it's sort of like it's a little bit at odds with the material, with the songs, because the songs on this album, dare I say it, are very unsabbath, contemporary with what was happening in hard rock and heavy metal at that period of time. There's a little bit of the old style hard rock, a little bit of gallop rock, but there's also power ballads and there's also a little bit of hair metal. Why don't we just get tuck into the album, and that'll be the best way to navigate what we think of the album and taking it from there. So, the first song, "In for the Kill." Now, this really goes to what I just said about it, Gallop Rock. This is a real Iron Maiden. Maybe, you know, I think Tony over the last couple of albums, previous to that, with the Dio era and with Born Again, always started the album with a real sort of punchy, out of the speakers, gallopy, up tempo sort of song. And this is nothing different. And wonderful vocal line from Glenn Hughes. He's really on in fine form. Do you like this song?
I do. Now, I'm I have to say right up front though, I already kind of don't agree with a lot of things that you've said. I think that this album, with a couple of exceptions, is extremely out of touch with music in 1986. It doesn't sound like the conventional heavy metal. It doesn't sound like the hair metal. This song is one of the more up-tempo tracks on the album, but it's not a fast song. It's nowhere near the speed of, say, Neon Nights from Heaven and Hell. In fact, it's a mid-tempo song, but it is one of the songs that's more similar to a traditional Black Sabbath song. That said, it's got a very pedestrian riff. What you really get out of it is Glenn Hughes. I mean, Glenn, and now in 1986, this is when Glenn is absolutely near rock bottom in his cocaine addiction. He is absolutely in it up to his neck. He hasn't gone through his 10-step program yet. He's not writing lyrics about being true to himself and finding his higher power. So there are a couple of songs, I think, where he made a concerted effort to write Dio-esque lyrics. And let's not forget that Glenn Hughes and Dio were good friends. They were
Yep.
friends since Hughes was in Deep Purple and toured with Elf. And Glenn actually lived with Ronnie for a while, slept
Yeah,
on his couch.
absolutely. But just to be clear, all the lyrics are not just Glenn Hughes. There's also
True.
Tony contributes. I do agree with you. How can somebody sing so well when they're in the throes of drug addiction? And you look
Yeah,
at
it's
some
crazy.
of the highlights of his career. Like I always champion Hughes for All, which is the pinnacle cocaine album, and the vocal performances on that. It's just unbelievable.
Very true. And if you read his, I think you've read his autobiography, right? He's got some
Yes,
really
I did.
interesting stories about this time in his life. Nothing good. Um, so it is it's kind of bizarre that he is able to deliver the goods, but there isn't a song on this album where you can say that's a really weak vocal performance. He kills it on the
Strong,
vocals.
strong.
I
And
I
if I
don't
if
always.
I remember, you did include this in our top 10 Sabbath albums when we did the ranking. If
Well, I'm
I'm not.
such a Glenn Hughes fan. Um, if so, it would be down at the bottom. It's actually between the three albums that Glenn did with Tony Iommi, because of course he
Mm,
also did the DEP sessions, which was available as a bootleg called Eighth Star for years and years, and Fused. This is my least favorite of those three albums, but it's still a pretty good album.
yeah, absolutely. I disagree with you. I think it's Gallop and it's up tempo. Dun, 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 dun. How can you not say that? How can you say that's mid tempo? Imagine
Because
if
you're
you're
listening.
on. If you're okay, imagine
This is
on.
the actual beat.
That's off tempo. You're riding a horse.
It's about 70 BPM, man.
Look, man, if you're riding a horse, that it's not a canter, it's a gallop. So I disagree with you, but that's what this show's all about. Um, Great vocal performance, and yeah, look, this is like traditional, maybe early '80s heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal, Iron Maiden, that in that sort of ballpark. But Glenn makes it his own, and his vocals, he's just hitting the mark straight away. I would be really interested to see how many times Glenn would do a take. Um, you know, it, I get this feeling that this guy's so naturally gifted, Reed. It'd be like one or two takes done. He just hits the pocket. But you hear this song, don't you, Reed? And you think, oh, traditional Sabbath. They're going in. They're playing to their audience. So then
So,
they're not doing something that's so out of the box that the listener is going to think, oh, okay, this is something a little bit different. They're just playing to the masses, to their audience.
yeah, I mean, I think there are definite differences. There's much less bass, for one thing. This is the first album without Geezer on the bass, and it really shows. They've got Dan Spitz, the brother of the lead guitar player in Anthrax.
Yes.
He's on the bass, and they've turned it. Now, I should say, I don't have clear memories of what it sounded like in 1986. Who could? What I know is what my 2004 edition sounds like, and the bass is down very low, but you get ultra clear drums from
Eric
American
Sing-
journeyman Eric Singer, a pre-Kiss Eric Singer, and the drums sound fantastic.
I think it's some of his best work. He is a journeyman, and I seem to have a lot of Eric Singer in my record collection just by Badlands, Kiss, whatnot, different other side projects. I think this is some of his best drumming work ever. It sounds thunderous. I played the album last night. I think the bass, the bottom end sounds fine and first
Okay.
pressing. And I have got the remastered edition they brought out 10 years ago when they were doing the whole catalog. It sounds okay. So, but look, we both agree we like this song. So,
Sure.
yep, different interpretation. Now, No Stranger to Love.
Maybe it's right, but I just can't understand the hurt I feel from my love secondhand. I know I should leave, but I just can't walk away.
Power ballad.
Yeah.
Now, Reed,
It's hard to.
you were saying, oh, I don't think it sounds like hair metal and not with the times. This falls into definitely what was happening on radio around 1986 with the power ballad and that really slow, drawn out guitar work. You know, the emotive lyrics, the emotive vocals. What do you think of this song?
So I think it's a terrible song for Black Sabbath. I don't think it's a bad song. I think it is absolutely a terrible Black Sabbath song. And as a power ballad, it's actually not very good. What makes a power ballad is actually elevating the chorus. So you've got ballad, and then the chorus comes in, you raise the level, you raise the intensity, and they don't do that on this song. So it's more of just a ballad with some distorted guitar to it. It's literally impossible to think of another time where a record company would have said, we're going to take this ballad and make it the single from a Black Sabbath album. That was 1986 for you. They did a music video. The music video is ridiculous. And I'll point out later, I think there's another song that they intended to be the single, and it's not this one. But
Yeah.
this is the one that they put out as the single, and I mean, it didn't do a lot.
Yeah, I think this song gets better over age, like a fine wine. I mean, it's not the greatest Black Sabbath song. This song
Right.
is a slow burn, and the underlying menace is the real chunky chords all the way through. And then,
So much chord work.
yeah, and then Glenn Hughes doing that really emotive singing. I think this really was the template for 1986. And this was the song that turned a lot of Sabbath fans off and going, what the hell am I listening to?
So, you know what I actually think this specific song sounds like? Rainbows Bent Out of Shape. It's so keyboard forward. It's the guitars are so dark. It's got, Glenn Hughes and Joe Lynn Turner are not a million miles apart as vocalists. This sounds like Bent Out of Shape to me.
No, I don't agree with you. I think that in Richie's world, everything's a little bit more riffy, a little bit more light. This has got a heaviness, a weight about it. Not saying that Rainbow doesn't have weight, but I'm saying this has got an underlying slow burn menace, and the chords are much thicker than you'd hear on Bent Out of Shape. Bent Out of Shape is very riffy and light and Euro pop. This one is in a different universe, so I disagree. But I like this song, and it should have been a Tony Iommi solo album. Let's just put it out there. Put Tony Iommi on the name, or create a band name,
Yes.
which has always been a problem because how do you start afresh? How do you market? So the record company probably heard this and going, imagine all the suits sitting around the table. What do we do? It's like a Coen Brothers movie. What do we do? What do we do? Sabbath. That's the most marketable way. But the problem is, it's so different to a traditional Black Sabbath album, so different to Ozzy, so different to Dio. For God's sakes, the previous album was Born Again. I mean, how do you market it? I
Right.
think,
And
I
the thing
think,
is, I think they're right. I think if they had stuck Iomi on it or some other name, that it wouldn't have sold even what it sold. But which you see on his subsequent solo albums, they weren't exactly
Yeah.
rockets on the charts.
And history shows supergroups that are created from scratch. I'm not talking about damn Yankees, but I'm talking bands like Contraband, where you've got Michael Schenker and guys and Rat and whoever, kind of flop. It's a
Right.
bit hard to kick off from ground zero. So you've got to really invest a lot to get a band, a name from ground zero from a supergroup. They'd have to push out a lot of money to market and go, Tony Iommi's big supergroup featuring Glenn Hughes. It's just
Right.
easier just to go to Sabbath. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So I once, in a similar vein, although a different medium, I watched a guy who was a network executive talking about how movie companies now think they can do spin-offs and start at the top, but spin-offs always start at the bottom and have to build their own audience. And that's the same with the supergroup. And one of the problems with it is they would have to start, touring clubs, opening act, work their way up the line. And when you've got guys that are already at the top, they don't want to take big steps back down to start playing little clubs and working their way up.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's go to the third track, Turn to Stone.
She was never meant to last. Her destiny was fatal from the start. A messenger from hell. She cast her deadly spell. Almost who did across her heart. Ain't no use in you trying.
So this is the first of the songs that I think of as a more traditional Sabbath song. Kind of. I think that this song actually is like a Dehumanizer era Dio track. It's a song about an evil woman casting a deadly spell. I mean, it's really got Dio-esque lyrics. It's got a pretty good riff to it. It's one of the more up-tempo tracks on the album. And like I said, I think it would have fit in on Dehumanizer. It's that type of track. So it's one I really like because it is more Sabbathy to me.
A messenger from hell. She cast a deadly spell on all those who dare to cross her heart. Glenn has cited in his book and in many interviews that he didn't feel quite comfortable singing lyrics that involve the dark arts. So I, but boy, he's a good actor. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think he's playing a role because his singing on that is really kind of gritty. And you know how Glenn goes into that soul R&B voice and so smooth, it's like honey. But on this album, and I don't know, it may be going in hand with his substance abuse. There's a certain grittiness, sandiness to the tone of his voice that I haven't heard on a lot of his other albums. Is that something you agree? There's a real guttural tone to his vocals on this album.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's worth remembering that people that snort a lot of cocaine, it literally eats away the membranes inside their
Mm.
sinus cavity. So I think it quite literally physically changed his voice. That is one thing. Oh, but I was going to say also, this song, despite the kind of dark lyrical subject matter, it's a weirdly happy sounding song. It's in a major key. It's got like a happy solo. So that's kind of strange, but I actually like the effect of it, that you have these really dark lyrics and this kind of happy, for Tony Iommi, happy music.
Yeah. And one thing I love hearing the chords. Nobody does the power chords like him. He's the maestro in metal because it just sort of gives this underlying menace all the way through the song. Yes, it is in a major key, but it makes it quite interesting and unusual. But I like this song. I like it a lot. Um, Sphinx, the Guardian, and that segues into the Seventh Star.
On the seventh star. Oh, on the seventh star. Hear the sound of
Now, this is like Egypto, Kashmir, kind of an epic metal song. What do you think of Sphinx the Guardian and the Seventh Star?
Right. Well, I mean, two very different things there. I think Sphinx is kind of pointless. Um, if it were just the intro to Seventh Star, it would be fine. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the beginning of Dio's Egypt. The chains are on. Talk about your Egypto chords. But musically, there's not a whole lot happening. It's establishing an atmosphere, but not really much in the way of music. It didn't deserve a title, but you know, Tony's under a contract to produce so many songs. They did this all through the Sabbath catalog, where they're like, we don't have enough songs to meet our contractual obligations, so we're going to take the intro to this song and give it its own title. But then you get into Seventh Star, and it's a good track. So it's kind of more of the what I think of as the heaven and hell style epic track, except it doesn't have that variety of tempos with it. And it's not nearly as long once you take away the Sphinx. If you add the Sphinx's minute and 20 seconds or whatever it is back onto Seventh Star, then you have a 7-minute epic track, where Seventh Star is just over, I think it's five, I wrote it down, 5:19. So you have another mystical lyric. You've got not the world's most interesting riff, but at least a definite riff. So you've got Tony doing his riff. You've got amazing drums. Eric Singer sounds awesome on this song. And you've got Glenn singing. And I can't believe I've gone all this way without saying, even though these aren't, I mean, by a really long shot, these are not my favorite riffs from Tony, but I love his solos on this album. Without exception, the solos are fantastic. They're melodic. They serve the songs. They are great solos. And I think his soloing in Seventh Star is really good.
Absolutely. I think this song it's a slow burn. There's a lot of slow burn, atmospheric hard rock on this album, and this is no different. And I just it's got that Egypto chordal feel about it. The lyrics are, I mean, it's been sung before in the heavy metal world. I think it all goes back to Kashmir. So it just goes to show that Led Zeppelin song from '75 also influenced Sabbath as well. I love it. I think it's a fine closer to the album, and I just like the atmosphere of it. It's got just an underlying menace, and I think there's an underlying menace to this album.
Well, I think you said the key word there, which is atmospheric. It's a very atmospheric album. The thing is, that was not the predominant style in the United States. That was not the predominant style of metal. If you look at 1986, you've got the rise of hair metal. So Twisted Sister, Motley Crue, Rat, these are huge bands. You've got thrash metal coming up. So Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax are putting out albums. This album doesn't really fit into that dynamic in American heavy metal. I distinctly remember when this album came out. Now, there weren't a lot of heavy metal fans in small town Montana, but the word that the other guys used to use to describe this album always was boring. Talking about, we were 18 years old and these guys would listen to it, and I don't know that they listened to it a lot, because they were like, oh, this album's really boring. I'm gonna go listen to, Somewhere, or I don't think Somewhere in Time was out quite yet. That came out later in '86. I'm gonna go listen to Power Slave again, or I'm gonna go listen to Out of the Cellar again. I was the only person who was a fan of this album among my circle of friends.
Yeah, look, I agree and disagree. I think that when we get into side two, a lot of the songs are much more contemporary, what was happening in music at that time. Another thing to realize is in Europe was very much still traditional heavy metal, which was a big market for Black Sabbath and bands of that ilk. England was starting to taper off, but they were still kind of receptive. If you look at the chart placings for this album, this hit number 28. Not a great sort of entry point, but in America, I think it was 79, and that was on the Sabbath name, and plummeted after that. So I agree and disagree, but I still think that I'll stand by my statement. I think that this album was definitely listening to what was out there, contemporary wise, and there are some influences on this album. Side two starts with Danger Zone. Danger Zone to me. Oh, I think of Top Gun. I think it's the most cliched lyric, two-word title. Throw it in a song. I've got so many songs in my record collection that have the word danger zone. What do you think of this one? Lazy lyric writing?
No, I mean, I don't think so in 1986. Actually, this is one I'll defend. I think it's a good well, for one thing, I had no idea it was the side two opener. And I had the album on one cassette, so I didn't have front back. My CD obviously, just runs the tracks in order. But I thought about that too at the time. Afterwards, you think Kenny Loggins had a massive hit with the Danger Zone from the Top Gun soundtrack. That did come out 4 months after Seventh Star. So when Glenn Hughes was recording this lyric, I don't think it was as much of a cliche. And certainly, nobody could have predicted that that was going to be one of the most popular songs of 1986.
I
So I
agree,
think,
but
timing has not been kind to that lyric.
yeah, maybe with that one, and I did mention Top Gun. Sorry about the chronological order, but there's a few AOR bands in the early '80s, and I can tell you, Danger Zone was a very common lyric.
Yeah, it's and again though, like you said, we actually don't know what Glenn wrote, what he didn't write, because they gave a kind of a group credit. Lyrics by Jeff Johns and Bart. Geez, I'm spacing on his name.
Jeff Barton.
Jeff Barton. Yeah. So Jeff Barton. I don't know. I always say Jeff Johns.
Jeff
Johns
sorry.
is a
Let's
comic book guy.
Yeah, let's correct it. Jeff Nichols. I don't know why I said Jeff Barton. Jeff Nichols. Yeah. Jeff Nichols. So additional lyrics were by Jeff Nichols, Jeff Glicksman, who was the producer. And look at his credentials. He did a stack of work with Kansas and our favorite, Yngwie Malmsteen, and Glenn Hughes.
Yeah, so we don't really know who wrote what. So, but this may not be one of the more lyrically deep songs on the album, certainly.
We'll talk about the final three. I might have something to say about that. But so Danger Zone, sonically, what do you think this sounds like?
I don't know if I necessarily well, I think it sounds very safe. I think they should have called it Comfort Zone, because Glenn is singing in his comfort zone, Tony's playing in his comfort zone. I think the song is fine. And it's got actual hooks in it. It's got hooks in the guitar, it's got hooks in the drums, it's got hooks in the vocals. And I think that this is the song that the band thought was going to be the single. It's constructed like a song that was meant to be a single.
And would you sort of hear a song like this maybe on a Dokken album? Maybe? I think so.
Maybe. More, heavy Toto almost more
than
Dokken. George Lynch rocks harder than this on most of their songs.
Yeah, but I don't think it'd be out of their ballpark. And this comes to my argument that there's a little bit of Sabbath hair metal. It's that maybe, like No Stranger to Love, I thought that was slow burn ballad, hair metal. Danger Zone, I could sort of see this song being in the realms of hair metal and being on a Dokken album or a band of their type.
It's not up-tempo enough for me. I mean, to be a hair metal song, it needed more energy.
Hair
That's why
metal,
that's
hair
why I
metal's
keep saying this album is not an American metal album. It may European absolutely, but
yeah.
it really does not match what's going on in heavy metal in the US.
Yeah, no, I think there are some influence. I think it's a potpourri. There's some influences there. I wouldn't dismiss that there's not hair metal on this, but yeah, look, Danger Zone. I agree with you. It's got hooks and more hooks than a normal Black Sabbath song, wouldn't
Sure.
you say? Do you think this could have been a single?
Oh yeah, it absolutely could have been a single. I mean, I it wasn't, I think, for a couple of years that they hit upon the magic formula of releasing a hard rocker first and then releasing a power ballad second. That about 1988, that was the way all of the albums that went to mega platinum success, they all did that. Have a rock
Yeah.
out, a rock song, and then a ballad. But I don't know if that would have had the same response in 1986, but this would have been a better single than No Stranger to Love.
I'll even be bold. If this album came out in '84, it would have been a bigger hit. So, Born Again came out in '83, right?
Right?
Wouldn't have been, imagine if this came out in '84. So you've got the purple, everything, everyone's talking purple, Perfect Strangers, etc., etc. I don't know what Sabbath were doing. I think he was just downing tools. But imagine if this album in '86 came out 2 years earlier. I think possibly it might have been a bigger hit. Do you think some of these songs would have slipped into that, what was happening in American radio or American hard rock and metal in that era?
I think they would certainly have had less competition. And that is something that you cannot overlook, is that there were simply more bands in the marketplace in 1986. So by this time, they're competing for a smaller piece of the pie.
Yeah, and I think they could have marketed the whole featuring the vocals of ex Deep Purple member Glenn Hughes. So anything that would have been sniffing the fumes of the Perfect Strangers tour, which was a huge hit, would have done well for Sabbath, but wasn't to be. Okay, now Heart Like a Wheel, Angry Heart, In Memory. To me, I played this side 3 or 4 times last night. And the vibe I got is that I think this is a suite. So Danger Zone's like a little bit of an overture. It's an outrider. But those three songs, to me, there's a bit of an emotional connection. And I think it's some of the most melancholy and sad Sabbath songs that have been ever committed to tape. I don't know if the lyrics are Iomi. I have an intuition it possibly is. But to me, this is like it's like an Abbey Road with the Beatles, where there's a little suite of songs at the end, and they're all connected. Am I? Do you agree with what I've just said? That there's kind of feels like a sonic or a thematic connection with these three songs.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to scratch too deep to find that. I mean, it is Heart Like a Wheel, Angry Heart, and then In Memory has the lyric Angry Heart.
Yeah,
So there's definitely they're grouping these three on the album together. We'll talk more about In Memory when we get to it. One thing that I think is really funny that is it doesn't mean anything now, but there's a movie called Heart Like a Wheel that came out in 1983 about a female drag racer whose name I can't remember. Kind of an unusual story, a biopic about this woman who drove drag racers. So when I saw a song called Heart Like a Wheel, I always associate it with that movie, even though it's got nothing to do with it.
did
But
that star? Did that star Bruce Willis's wife that was in Die Hard, Bonnie? I think at a second. I think she might have been up for an Oscar.
Bedelia, Bonnie Bedelia.
Up for an Oscar for that one. I am familiar with that movie.
Yeah, I don't remember who was in it. I just remember that it existed.
Mm,
Um, so I think this song, this is really when I think of this is a Tony Iommi solo album. This is a Tony Iommi solo song.
Don't leave me standing here. Don't leave me standing here. Your heart's like a wheel, just waiting to roll.
It's the bluesiest thing he's recorded in 16 years. It's got 4 guitar solos. That is a lot of guitar solos for one song.
Stretching
Yes.
it out.
I think this is the type of song that if he had done a tour as the Tony Iommi Project or the Tony Iommi Band or whatever, this would be the song where he would just solo for 15 minutes and the singer would go, take a whiz and get some water, smoke break, snort a few lines, whatever. And Tony would just be standing there playing and playing and playing.
But it's not boring, Reed. It's not boring.
No, it's got
because it's
fantastic solo.
It's not a bourbon time song where you go, to the bar. To me, it's really interesting, but I just get this feeling, and this is the start of the 3 songs, where it gets really sad and morose. I don't say morose in a bad way, but there's a lot of melancholy. And these 3 songs match the album cover. Tony doesn't look very happy there. And Tony doesn't look even happier there. He looks very reflective and morose. I think these 3 songs match the album cover.
I'm interested. I think it's interesting that they called the album Seventh Star rather than Heart Like a Wheel. And I bet that's just because once the record company had pushed through the idea of making it a Black Sabbath album, they thought Seventh Star sounded more Sabbath-y than Heart Like a Wheel. Because I really think of this as the keystone song of this album.
I think it's one of the best songs on the album. Do you agree? Best song?
Yeah, well, no, actually, I like one other better.
All right,
but
we'll just.
I
Okay.
do love this song, and I love the variety in not the lyrics, because actually Glenn's got a pretty one note. That's the wrong. He sings it the same way. I don't want one note sounds dismissive. He sounds amazing on this song, but he's not using wide dynamic range until he gets to the end, and he's got that really soulful "Don't leave me standing there." Yeah, it's really good. But the solos, 4 solos, all very, very different. Some of them are slow and melodic. He's got some really flashy stuff on it. This is the song where Tony really cuts loose.
I reckon he wrote this about Lita. You say you don't love me. You say you don't care. Don't leave me standing here. I think their relation was very tempestuous. Read the Lita story. Doesn't put Tony in a good light. And Tony doesn't really delve into it too much in his biography, but it feels quite real.
Right. And of course, he stole her band to record this album. This is Lita's backing band. That's his band.
Yeah. I actually think the 3 songs on side 2 is the best part of the album. This is the album. Let's go into Angry Heart. What do you think of this song?
Still remember how we used to be. I thought the only thing that mattered was me.
So this is my favorite song on the album, which is very strange because there are so many things that are not Black Sabbath about this song. For one thing, this is a Deep Purple song to me. It's got that organ sound right up front that's just as important as the guitar. And it's got no guitar solo. There's a little bit of more complicated stuff that he's playing behind the chorus. But how many, in the entire catalog, how many songs are there without a guitar solo? Not many. So that really stands out. Plus, I love the lyrics on this, and I think that this one is 100% Glenn Hughes. The lyrics just sound like Glenn Hughes.
It's a perfect segue in the Suite of Three because again, there's a lot of melancholy, there's a lot of sadness. Um, so I think the track listing of this album is quite inspired to put these three in a row. And yeah, I think his singing on this is sensational. I hear the Purple. I hear Jeff Nichols with his keyboard washes, whether it's a Hammond. I love it. Um, a lot of emotional heaviness on this. There's a lot of weight on this song. And I
Yeah.
use that word a little bit on this album. Uh, Another slow burn song, would you say? It's not something that you listen to and go, oh, that's a hit. It's like a sugar hit. It's one that if you listen to again and again and again, its charm creeps up on you. What do you think?
Well, again, it's my favorite song, so I love it.
But did you like it straight away?
Yes, from the very moments that I heard that do
Mm.
dun, I was
No.
hooked. I
Yep.
was hooked from the very beginning of this
Yeah.
song. I
Yeah.
will say I don't know a lot of other people that are as fond of the song as I am.
Or
When
me.
I tell people that's my favorite song on the album, I get a lot of really?
Yeah. Oh, well, you are a contrarian.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, that's true. I love the last song, In Memory.
It still haunts me. There's a silence where you used to be.
So 1-2 punch, Heart Like a Will, Angry Heart, and this is the end of the trilogy. It's just so gut wrenchingly sad. No one told me the way I should feel. You left an aching heart, lost and lonely. The feeling goes on. You were the one friend I had. You gave me so much love. Now the tears remind me you're gone. I reckon it's an Iommi lyric.
Yeah. Does he say aching heart? I always heard angry heart. I don't have a lyric sheet, so
You left an aching heart.
yeah, okay. Well, learn something new
It's
then.
still haunting me. And the way that Glenn Hughes wraps his vocal around that lyric, it's just gut wrenching. It's like he's putting everything into it. So, again, I would love to know how many takes that Glenn would do because you hear so much emotional power he vests in this one song. You wouldn't expect him to do multiple takes, otherwise, it'd just be diminishing returns, wouldn't it? You'd be
Yeah,
fatigued.
I suspect that he did one take and then maybe they would do little bits of coverage, if they needed
Mm,
little spots that he wasn't quite enunciating or whatever, but
yeah,
I bet he didn't need a lot of passes through the vocal booth.
yeah. So, what do you think of this song?
So, actually, um I love the singing, I don't love the music. And it's too short. So, this song always it feels lacking to me because I'm like I not in the way that oh they left me wanting more, in a way where I'm like there needs to be more to this. For one thing, it's clearly the back half of Angry Heart. And to my mind it actually works better if you play it before Angry Heart. I think if they had flipped those two songs, that it would have left the album on a little bit higher energy of a note, and that would have worked better for me. But I agree with everything you say on Glenn's vocal performance. I think, Glenn was a man who was in the process of losing everything to his addiction, and it was not probably difficult for him to channel that into a performance.
Yeah, I'll say it again. It's circa this period, 85, 86, 87, that Glenn has laid some of his greatest vocal performances, like Phenomena, which we covered on a show. Check it out, Rock Daydream Nation.
Oh, you did?
Fantastic vocals. Again, that was a dark period of his life. I imagine that he was, again, in the throes of substance abuse, but he pulled it out of the bag. So
Dating Linda Blair at the time, I think, too.
yeah. Look, his book is a harrowing read, but I heartily recommend it. Definitely fills in a lot of gaps in the respect of the Deep Purple Glenn Hughes story. So, that's the end of the album. It in the day, I kind of remember it got a bit of flack, and Black Sabbath go out on the road. Glenn Hughes was the singer, and it was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah.
Because Glenn had an altercation with the
The tour
roadie
manager.
tour manager and
Yeah.
punched him in the nose, and apparently there was blood or at the back of his throat, and he couldn't sing, you know, and he kept on pushing on, I think for the third, the fourth, the fifth concert, only lasts 5 gigs or 5 concerts or so, and what I've seen and what I've heard through testimonies, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Melissa Nee, who's a friend to the channel, Melissa, she rated that as one of the worst concerts she saw. She saw that concert and she thought he was dying on stage. He looked like death warmed up.
Yeah,
And
and you have to wonder about a tour manager. Literally, his job is to manage the tour, who
mm,
punches out the singer. Also, that man was probably murdered not too long after that. The story is that he got on a ferry boat. I don't remember where it was, but when the boat arrived at its destination, he wasn't on the boat.
yeah, very strange story. But Glenn was overweight. He wasn't healthy. Like in the world of Black Sabbath, Tony wasn't any angel. And imagine the rest of the band weren't angels. Glenn was kind of out there and it was just more visible. Anyway, Glenn Hughes out, Ray Gillen came in
Right.
and saved the tour. I've heard some live bootlegs and recordings, and he sings magnificently, but that wasn't to last. So another chapter in the Black Sabbath history, but I stand from the altar of rock. I think this is the most underrated Black Sabbath album.
Mm.
What do you think?
I think it. Well, I mean, you certainly have to say that it's underrated, because it's not rated highly by a lot of people. I think that this album makes the cardinal sin of not giving the people what they want. Now, the people weren't entirely sure that they wanted Born Again, but Born Again was a moderate success. It didn't have lasting success, but it was well received when it was released. This is a pretty radical departure from that, though. And I think if they had done something a little more Born Again-ish, that people might have been willing to accept it more as Black Sabbath. And by the time we get Eternal Idol in I think 2 years, I didn't look up the release date of Eternal Idol, but I think it's 88. Um, Black Sabbath is back to being a much more Sabbathy kind of band. But again, since it was supposed to be Tony's solo album, I think he's consciously trying to not sound like Black Sabbath. So it is, as they say in the programming world, it's a feature, not a bug, but it's not what audiences want.
I think this kind of damaged Black Sabbath.
Oh yeah.
Commercial, their stocks. And I don't say that, from a negative point of view, because I love this album. But I think people didn't were not receptive to this album. And when the Tony Martin era came, the fan base was gone. They saw, oh, there's a Black Sabbath album. They used this album as a point of reference. Oh, if it's anything that sounds like Glenn Hughes and the Seventh Star, I'm not interested. And the Tony Martin era, that was as low commercially. The stocks were way low. They were playing clubs. Black Sabbath, 1973, 74, playing the California Jam in front of 200, 300,000 people. And then in, the Tony Martin era playing clubs, 500 people. That's a fall from grace indeed. But this album, unfortunately, was part of it.
I
And
think
I think it,
anytime a band has that many changes in personnel. And, if you're going to change personnel, the singer is the last person you want to change, because the singer, while guitar players always want to think it's the guitar player, I think, Martin Popoff always argues that the singer is the most important person in a band. And I tend to agree with that. And Sabbath has changed. Yeah, they only had Ronnie for 2 albums. They had, Ian for 1 album. They had Glenn for 1 album. Ray Gillen doesn't even get an album. And then you've got Tony Martin coming on. I mean, that's a lot of personnel changes, and people get kind of put out with that sort of thing. It's like, I remember when Kiss kept changing guitar players, and every time they would come out with a new album, the press was like, and it's a different band again.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, it was inevitable that in the Black Sabbath ranks that they had to get Ozzy back in the band, and then their stocks rose dramatically because you had grunge, you had a lot of bands in that alternative bands that were citing Sabbath as an influence. Black Sabbath, the stocks rose. They're at that peak, like to this very day. So, but if Ozzy didn't come back into the band, I think it would have just maybe the stocks would have continued to plummet.
yeah, I mean, as much as Ronnie loved being back in Black Sabbath, Dehumanizer wasn't a massive commercial success. They didn't really have prospects of massive commercial success. They could have continued as a mid-tier band, I think, indefinitely, but they were never going to be a big band again
Yeah,
without Ozzy back in the band.
I have a theory that time and distance makes the heart grow fonder, and I think that if they didn't record Dehumanizer and there was no Sabbath activity for a considerable period of time, and they got back together, then it may have been they might have had a chance of success and re-establish that lineup. But when you're constantly touring and got different lineups, and there's not much of a gap to make the audience want more, to make them the heart grow fonder. Oh, I really miss seeing Sabbath. Not so much. But look, we're sidetracking a little bit here. I love this album. I think it's incredibly underrated. And folks, if you want to hear some grade A singing from Glenn Hughes, yeah, please listen to this album. Any final thoughts, Reed Little?
Yeah, it at least track down, if you've never listened to it, track down Heart Like a Wheel. I mean, it is the showcase, it's the showpiece, it's the money shot on this album. So give it a listen, and you'll hear some fantastic singing and some fantastic guitar playing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Reed. I think we're going to do our next show is going to be Rainbow Stranger in Us All. So I'm sure you've got some very interesting things to talk about, something for our folks, our viewers to look forward to. I've certainly got some things to say about that album. You can see Reed Little on the Contrarians. He's a friend to this channel, hundreds of shows. Check out the Black Sabbath Born Again panel. That was a hoot. That was a lot of fun. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Put your comments. What do you think of this album? We love it. Love reading your comments. But one thing's for sure, Reed and I will be doing more shows in 2026 and beyond. All the best, Reed, and cheers.
Cheers, Peter.
See you later.